Hey everybody, welcome back and happy new year to the Giant Zone. This is episode 44. Tonight you've got your two co-hosts, Steve the Banker,
Good evening.
and you have yours truly, of course, Fly Guy Carl. And we want to welcome you all back and hope that everybody's holidays were safe, healthy, and happy. And we wish you all a happy new year. We hope it's prosperous for you and it's filled with nothing but good things. And we just want to thank you all for your support last year, our first year, and we hope you continue supporting us this year into the new year, and we hope to grow it and continue to bring you good content. And a couple things before we get into what we normally do. First, we want to just keep asking if you could please continue to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and please tell other people about us and if they can subscribe as well. And also, if you download our podcast, please continue to leave us 5-star ratings. Again, all of that just helps us to continue to bring you good, solid content, and it means the world to both of us. And we appreciate all the support greatly. And also, just a quick prayers up to Buffalo Bills safety, Damar Hamilton. His injury last night was scary. Steve and I were just talking about it before we started recording here, how shocking and scary that was. And, young guy, 24 years old. We just, I think I speak for you, Steve, when I say just prayers up and hope he pulls through this and makes a full recovery. Football is secondary at this point. Just make a full recovery and live a long, healthy life. What do you think, Steve?
Couldn't have said it better myself. Sums it up.
Thanks, buddy. All right, we've got through that. Let's get into this, Steve. It's good to have you back. Missed
Thank
doing
you.
this with you for a couple of weeks, so glad to have you back. And really, boy, I'm telling you, Steve, this has been a great first year together, and the Giants gifted us with a playoff berth. So really, would you have thought this, Steve, when we first started this last February?
Some would say we started this at the worst possible time. We came off uh, uh, another terrible season, another losing season. We started this podcast in the off season when, if we're being honest with ourselves and our fans, I mean, there's not a lot to talk about initially. There's change coming. And nobody, as we've said 1,000 times, nobody expected the season that we're having right now. So look, it's easy to do something like this on paper when the team is doing well and you're in the middle of a dynasty or you're middle of at least of something great. But I think that's part of what's made this special is we started it when we didn't know what the future would hold, and Giants fans could only hope and pray that we get the right general manager and the right coach and at least start something. As you've said so many times, this is a rebuild, right? Like, all right, well, let's start rebuilding. Well, we built this podcast, we built this from the ground up. The Giants are rebuilding themselves from the ground up. The roster, the culture, and this is just it's just breathtaking what they've been able to accomplish already. There's still so much that we as Giants fans all disagree on, which I think is why it's great that there's our podcast and so many other good podcasts, some of which have become some good friends of ours. So my final thought before we begin is it's funny. The last time we did a show was a few weeks ago, and we're getting ready to play the Eagles. So lots happened. We're now in the playoffs, and we got one more game against the hated Eagles coming up. So plenty to talk about.
Excellent. Well said, Steve. So let's kind of get into this tonight. Let's just do a recap on
Yeah.
Sunday's big win. What are some of your takeaways from that, Steve?
So it we're recording this on Tuesday, so I think the nice thing about that is a lot of our friends at some of the other shows do it the night of the game or the very next day. But we always like to give it a day and a half to 2 days because you have your injury reports that come out, et cetera. And I think the other thing is it gives us some time to sort of take a step back, sleep on it, and look back and digest what did we just watch. First of all, they scored over 30 points for the first time in several years, at least since I think it was the start of the 21 season. That was the longest streak going without 30 points on offense in the entire NFL.
50
So,
games. Sorry to interrupt, but
yeah,
50, I had that same note. 50 games.
great to get that gorilla off the shoulder, right? I'm loving the offensive game plan. I think uh, I've definitely had mostly a love affair this season with Daboll as a coach and Kafka as an offensive coordinator. Um, and we all know it's kind of a combination of the two. Their histories in Buffalo, Kansas City, and there's been a lot of talk. We're even seeing some Eagles concepts, Sirianni Eagles concepts in there. But there's also been a lot that we haven't been happy with, or we've been frustrated at times, or there's been some inconsistencies, and I think a lot of that is um, A, they've been learning along the way, learning their roster, and B, the roster has been constantly changing. So my takeaways are I loved Kafka's offensive game plan. He's hamstrung. He has few, if no, explosive offensive players, other than Saquon and Daniel. When he takes off his straight line speed, he doesn't have much wiggle. But um, he's operating in a world where he's got an offensive line that's been rebuilt this season, and it's also had some turnover, as we know, on the interior of the side, and Evan Neal, who's been injured at times. He has no explosive weapons, and the starting trio of wide receivers, all three, are either no longer on the team or hurt or no longer participating. Kenny Galladay, I think, had 7 snaps. So he has a brand new group of wide receivers, nobody truly explosive for big chunk plays. Yet, after this past weekend's game, the number 9 offense in the entire NFL in red zone. So what does that tell you? And I think we have a good enough now. We have a good enough sample size. We can take a step back and say, you know what? He's operating with as limited resources as almost any team in the NFL, if not more than any other team in the NFL in terms of lack of explosive players. Yet when he gets down been under the 20, we're one of the best offenses in football. So what is that telling you? We're missing some pieces. We don't to get from the 20-yard line to the 20-yard line. That's where they're going to take a jump next year. So the fact that they scored over 30 points in offense, all those things I just said, I love the offensive game plan. Daniel Jones, we'll get to him. I don't know how much more we can say at this point. I think he's earned the right to be our quarterback next year. I'm getting a little concerned. There's a lot of hyperbole on Twitter. Oh, he's our franchise quarterback. Whoa, 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 whoa. We'll talk about that. Because I do think there's a distinct difference between re-signing him and is he the franchise quarterback? To me, that sounds like a commitment for the next 5 to 10 years. Two different things can be true at the same time. But he had 4 touchdowns, 2 running, 2 passing, 125.2 passer rating.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, come on. It's and you saw I posted on Twitter after the game. It's just getting tiresome, people hating on him.
Yep.
He's not perfect. He's still a work in progress, but give the guy his credit. He's worked so hard, the coaching staff. So this game was what we've been looking for. Dude, you, Saquon, you guys want to come back? You guys want big contracts? Rise, carry this team on your shoulders when it matters most. And they did it. And I don't want to hear that the Colts were one of the worst teams in the NFL. I remember during the Coughlin years when we had some awesome teams, Super Bowl winning teams,
Yeah.
we would often play down to the level of our competition. They didn't do that. They did exactly what they were supposed to do. Um, what we've learned now after the last 2 games is they've developed solid receivers that Daniel can rely on, Hodgins and James in particular. We saw it in Minnesota. Hodgins had 8 catches for 89 yards and a touchdown. James had 8 catches for 90 yards. Neither of those guys are explosive. Neither of those guys are number 1 receivers. Maybe on a good team, they're not even a number 2. But gosh darn it, look at the production, and it wasn't just a flash in the pan. My takeaway from this past game, Hodgins did it again. He only had 4 receptions for 42 yards, but a touchdown. To me, that's consistency. And James, 7 catches for 76 yards and a touchdown. So they're going away from Slayton a little bit. I think Slayton's starting to demand some coverage because he was the one receiver that did step up. And it was like, well, but all we had was Slayton. No, they've now developed these other 2 guys. So now we have an offense that I don't know that we can play against the San Franciscos of the world. That may be the best D in football. But I came away from this game saying, now we have an offense. We have Saquon. We have an offensive line. Some games are going to be better than others. We have Daniel. Daniel can carry us. He's finally got some receivers that he seems to be developing chemistry with. And then my final thought, I'm not going to talk much about defense. I want to take any of that away from you if you're planning on talking about it. But I put a tweet out there during the game. Landon Collins, I think my exact words were, Landon Collins, I love you. You are now truly a giant again. Enough said. It was so heartwarming. See a guy do it the right way, came back, swallow some humble pride. Yeah, he had the big contract in Washington. He's got more money than any of us are ever going to see the rest of our life. It's not about money. This guy has taken essentially a demotion. He was on a practice squad of his old team, and he's not even playing the same position. And us as fans, it's like, dude, that's your best position. Play it. We all know, we've heard the interviews. He still thinks he's a safety.
Yeah.
Eat the humble pie, take a position on the practice squad. Um, he did it the right way. He didn't talk smack. He was a good soldier. He came in. I don't know how any Giant fan wasn't. I think every Giant fan was ecstatic, proud, every emotion in the book, just bursting with joy to see Landon Collins get that interception and take it for six.
Yeah.
I'll end it there.
So, a couple things. I'm just gonna hit on a couple things. Then I actually took a note on something that you said that I want to discuss with you as well. So, you know what I really love, and I agree with you, Steve. The whole Daniel Jones, is he coming back next year or not? That whole argument to me is just tiresome. I'm just so done with these people. We are on the verge and now facing a playoff game. We are going to have a playoff game. And yet all you see is people still talking about Daniel Jones has got to go. I don't care. I'm done with it. He's coming back. He's earned the right to come back. The question is, do they agree on a deal? But they are definitely going to engage him to come back next year. I'll take that to my grave, Steve. And you know what else I loved? I loved that he subbed himself out and he took a curtain call from the crowd. Good for him. You know what? He talk about a good soldier. With all he's put up with on social media, in the press, the injuries, coaches, and you know what? The biggest game he plays in his career, and he stepped up and he took a curtain call from the home crowd. Good for him. I was so happy for him. So happy for him. And I agree with you also about Landon Collins. If you remember, after Landon Collins signed with Washington, he didn't have such nice things to say about the Giants or the Giant organization. And I don't know if a lot of people forgot that, or just the defense at the time that they brought him back was just in such a need of bodies that no one ever really said anything. But you know what I was proud of? To your point, he was a good soldier. You know what? He committed himself to the team, and whatever I got to do, I'm here. Maturity, maybe getting released from Washington and not having a big market humbled him a little bit. I don't know. I'm not going to say, but it was good to see that. I respect that from professional players. I honestly do, especially in this time where it's all about me, and the celebrations and all of that. And it's nice to see guys be professional. I really appreciate that. You mentioned Richie James, 7 for 76 and a touchdown. His last two games, 15 catches, 166 yards. You know what? Great to see him coming back. I think he may have lost confidence there for a while. Great to see him coming back. And boy, is he emerging at the right time. Now, speaking of that, and by the way, no sacks allowed either. That was impressive. That stuck out to me. But you mentioned something about Darius Slayton. Do you think Slayton's emergence, hence now he's getting looked at as far as coverage, do you think that's opened up the field, let's say, for Richie James, for Isaiah Hodgins? Do you think that maybe his emergence has actually helped them?
So Indy had the number 11 pass defense in the NFL going into that game. Their offense is a clown show, right? We all know that. So the Giants should have held them to 14 points or less. I mean, I think most people, that was a consensus.
Right.
Their defense, now they had their linebacker, who's probably their best defender, is hurt. And I think one, if not both of their corners who were having issues during the game, staying in the game. I think there were some issues there, if I remember. regardless, I mean, DeForest Buckner down low, plus you had Quiddy Pay on one side. I mean, listen, it's still a solid defense. Uh, I think he's drawing attention. It's tough, right? When you're watching the game, the camera is not showing you like the all 22 where you can actually see the field and how the secondary is covering a guy. Are they doubling him? Are they playing zone? I can't see that. I didn't see that. I think to answer your question, the most important piece to our offense is Daniel Bellinger. Um, he's just he's not he's not at that point yet where he's catching 6 balls for 80 yards, and I think he'll get there. He's just a rookie. They say it's perhaps the toughest position to transition from college because
Mm.
you're basically playing two positions. You're an offensive lineman and a wide receiver, right?
Yeah.
A true wide tight end is doing both. Um, but we've seen the difference in our run game when he's out there blocking. He's our best blocking tight end. When we see the difference when he's out there and running pass routes, um, in the red zone where over the season Kafka was able to get a little creative with him, but also he, he's a true option for Daniel. Um, and we saw that in the game where Daniel had that beautiful pass down the left sideline to him. And it was maybe the most exotic play they called, and it was so much fun to watch how the play unfolded. So I don't know that Darius um, does that. I think he's still limited, right? He's our only deep threat, but um, he's still inconsistent with his hands. He still has a lot of drops, and I think he's the most dangerous weapon we have. But I don't know that he's demanding coverage like a true number one. So
Well, all
you
right.
know,
So let me come at it a different way. All right, and maybe I was a little vague in how I posed the question. If I was, I apologize. Do you think maybe the deep threat that he poses, because he is our fastest receiver, do you think that's creating space, short, maybe over the middle or in the seams? Me, I'm just throwing it out there. I hadn't thought about it until you just mentioned his name, but I'm wondering if that's opening up some real estate for these other guys in the slots or in the flats, let's say, and maybe they're clearing him out. I don't know, Steve. Just a talking point.
I think the base concept, I should say, for most teams when they play us is to just overload the box,
Yeah.
to try to take Saquon away,
Mm,
um, try to take Daniel away from his initial quick RPOs, which is why a lot of Daniel's runs take some time to develop.
yes.
And then he'll go the opposite way, let the defense flow first and commit. I don't think he's going to do that against, let's say, San Francisco with incredibly fast
Oh,
linebackers, great coverage. So it's going to work against the Chicago. It's going to work against certain teams that, regardless of the speed of their linebackers, they're not disciplined. They overflow, and then and Kafka will have, um, those zone reads that he does. But I think the base concept for most defenses, the sample size all season has been when they've had success, overload that box and also blitz the pass. So they're blitzing so it gives them the option to not just blitz the run, but also if the run turns into a pass, now they've overloaded the box and it does, which is why the offensive line's protection is so important, right? Because if they are overloading the box, a lot of those routes that Slayton was running, if they're deep concepts, that takes time to develop. So what was nice, we saw a number of games ago, was they started having Slayton run those 10 and 20-yard concepts that don't take quite as long.
yeah.
Um,
And finally, Steve, here's my last thing, and this is just a general point, but I'm going to make it anyway. Um, look, this team started hot, right? Then they went through a rough patch, and now they seem to have their legs back underneath them.
yeah.
I think we've seen this team mature over the course of the year. I think we've seen this team continue to improve overall. I mean, I think all teams go through a rough patch. Quite honestly, the Eagles are going through theirs now. Whether that's because Jalen Hurts is in the lineup or not remains to be seen. But they've looked a little vulnerable lately as well. But in addition, Steve, you know what? In addition to this team maturing and this team improving, this coaching staff has improved and matured and really grown more and more into their roles and grown together as a staff in as much as getting this team to where they're at. They got this team through the rough patch. All right. You look, we're all familiar with, they went through rough patches with Joe Judge, and he lost his mind. Right. He couldn't right the ship. Shermer couldn't right the ship. All right. Before that, they couldn't right the ship. I don't know why I couldn't remember his name, but anyway, this staff righted the ship. They stuck to what their game plan. They stuck to what they said they were going to do. They stuck to what got them out of the gate quick. And you know what? A couple tweaks here and there, and here we are in the playoffs. So I just want to give the coaching staff the credit as well. It's not just the players on the field. Kafka's done a much better job lately calling games offensively. Daboll, the way he had this team prepared to play Washington, the way he had this team prepared to come out Sunday. All right. Philadelphia, I don't think anybody expected to win there. All right. They competed. All right. Okay. It is what it is. But overall, Wink has been solid on defense all year long. They've turned in some efforts that, quite honestly, I don't think many of us saw coming. So it's just the direction that this team is going and just feels so right. And then I'm just enjoying the ride right now, man. I got to be honest with you, brother. This is great. It's great.
Look, there's things that really piss me off at times when I watch because, you want them to win.
Right.
I want them to run the ball better. I want them to pull their guards but then and I finally saw that one play where Feliciano pulled at center and led Saquon down. Saquon had maybe his biggest run of the game, I think it was. I was like, where's that been?
Right.
On defense, we went from being one of the better run stopping teams to just one of the worst.
Yeah.
In fact, I think we're dead last now. Like, we're just such a terrible. But then I take a step back and I talk to myself and I go, wait a minute. We have like literally the worst linebacking core in all of football. We have an offensive line that is still a work in progress. We have a rookie right tackle who got hurt, wasn't quite the same. I think this was his first decent game since he's come back from his injury. He's a tremendous athlete, but he's still learning. His brain is still probably firing constantly, trying to get comfortable, slow the game down. And we have three interior offensive linemen that, we love Bredesen. He finally came back and provided some better run blocking, and we love Gates, but Gates probably should be our center, but they seem beholden to Feliciano. None of those guys are known as pulling linemen. Gates, Feliciano, Bredesen. So then I take a step back. I'm like, relax, Steve. Like, we don't have the roster that hopefully we'll have in a year or two.
Right.
Hopefully they're going to get some better offensive linemen, especially on the interior. Obviously on the interior, we have our bookends. That hopefully will give them some ability to do some more things in the run game. We're going to get some decent, forget awesome, just get some linebackers in the offseason and free agency or the draft. It's going to improve. So I think as fans, so many of us are probably like, how come they don't do this? Look at the roster. Coach of the year.
Steve.
I don't understand if he doesn't win Coach of the Year. I don't. It will make zero sense to me. Some people are like, oh, Sirianni's won third. He was right to the playoffs last year. Whatever. We can have a whole discussion about that, but he's Coach of the Year.
I go through. I'm a fan with you. I'm a fan like you. I want to win every game. Yeah. I want perfection every play. I want a tackle for a loss every play on defense. I'm just like you, Steve. But then I remind myself, all right, well, the draft is over. Free agency is over. Trade deadline's passed. The roster is what the roster is. It goes back to when Jason Garrett was our offensive coordinator. I ran a vanilla offense. But again, did anybody stop and think that maybe he ran the offense he did because we just didn't have the horses to use the entire playbook to do certain things? And I tend to believe, to your point, that's still what we're seeing here with these guys. All right, these guys have gotten a little bit more creative. And again, this is a little bit of a different roster than we had last year, but we still don't have weapons across the board. So, I understand your point, but I also kind of I'm taking my medicine with it and just saying, all right, look, now I just, I don't care how they look and how they get there, as long as they have more points on the scoreboard at the end of the game. I'm happy. But I
Yeah,
understand.
when I think back to Eli, I don't know that other than maybe 1 year, his best year, I don't know that there was any time where he was considered by your average NFL fan or pundit or media personality one of the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks in the NFL
Right.
during his career. And we as Giants fans are like, oh no, that's not true. He won 2 Super Bowls. He should be in the Hall of Fame. Yeah, I agree. But during when he played, so why do I say that? Because when I think of today, I don't know if Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady are still considered top 5. People have already seemed to sort of pivot
Yeah.
away from them, away from Russell, and now they like to bring up Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, and usually there's some debate about the fifth one in there. I'm not saying I totally believe that myself. A year or two ago, they were talking about Kyler, Lamar, but we've seen a pivot now from the old guard of quarterbacks to the new.
Yeah.
But here's the point. The reason I say all that is not to how many Super Bowls have they won? So if you think about, well, Josh Allen, he's the best. He hasn't won a Super Bowl yet. And guess what? He's already been in the league. Joe Burrow went to the Super Bowl, but he didn't win. Patrick Mahomes, that's it. And he's only won one. So I say all that because it's a team sport. These guys don't fall off of trees. Um, I, to, as you just said, let's be realistic. This is a rebuild, but we're being spoiled right now with this coaching staff and what they've been able to do.
It's about managing the expectations.
Yeah.
You know. All right. So there's that, Steve. What would you like to go into next?
So let's pivot to next week. So uh, the the question that everybody's talking about as soon as that game was over, um, I watched all the pressers 2 days in a row with Daboll, and man, I give credit to those guys. They keep firing away regardless. He seems to answer the question, and they keep asking it: is he going to play the starters versus Philly? So what do you think?
So obviously, Daboll hasn't given an answer on it yet, and he's probably not. And I saw something where the answer he gave yesterday was the same answer he gave in Buffalo just a couple years ago. Um, I think they're going to play tight-lipped for a couple of reasons. I don't think they want Philadelphia to be able to get comfortable game planning for them.
Yeah.
I think there's a little gamesmanship. It's Philadelphia, and hey, we're in the playoffs just like everybody else, and we can play these games now. Here's my thoughts. So Philadelphia is a 13 and a half point favorite right now, and it's in Philadelphia. Okay. Um, Saquon has had 352 touches this year, second in the league. Okay. If the Eagles win this game, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. If the Eagles lose this game, they can still be the number 1 seed. Whereas us, we're locked into the 6th seed, win or lose. It's just a question now of who do we play. All right. So do you risk additional injury and still not affect what happens to the Eagles? Possibly. Do you go all in to beat the Eagles to help Dallas? You want to do that? And again, all right, so I'm sure Daboll's not thinking like that. I'm sure Shane's not thinking like that. But, we as fans, we are. Um, you know what? I understand the train of thought. Hey, look what we did to the Patriots at the end of their undefeated season. We went toe to toe with them. We didn't rest our starters, and that was the springboard that got us to the Super Bowl. Eventually, beat them in the Super Bowl, preventing them from being undefeated. Okay, I understand that train of thought. But what if you go all out to beat this Eagles team and you don't win the game? And you take on some additional injuries over the course of the game. Okay. I don't want to sound like I don't want to say the word I'm thinking. It starts with a P and it ends with a Y. Okay. I don't want
I
to
knew
say,
I knew you were thinking that.
yeah, but We got our first playoff game since 2016, man. You know what? I can almost see them doing here what they did the last time we played Philadelphia. Hey guys, let's get through this game and let's get ready to go against Minnesota or whomever. I don't want to say they look past it because I don't want to say they look past Philadelphia the last time. But I think there's a caution. They're throwing a little caution into the wind. So I guess to answer your question, do you play your starters? Maybe you have. See how the game is going. But boy, the injury bug scares the hell out of me, especially with this team. So I don't know. And you know what? Not for nothing. Look, the Indianapolis defense is not the Philadelphia defense, but Matt Breida had his best game as a Giant against the Colts. I'm not saying start Tyrod Taylor, start Matt Breida, start Kenny Golladay throwing the ball all day. And I'm not saying that. Maybe you play your starters, but you alter the playbook. I don't know. I don't see them going all out to win this game and risking injury. That's just my take. And I think you're going to see a lot more rotations. Let's put it that way. You might see starters on the field, but I think you're going to see a lot of your plan B players rotated in more often this game. That's just my thoughts, Steve.
I think that I I pretty much agree with you. I think they're going to treat it like a preseason game. I think there's certain players that need to be rested. Not a lot, but like Leo is the number one that comes to mind. He's playing with a bad shoulder injury. Uh, Probably needed to keep resting, but he came back and gutted it out the last couple of games. I mean, we needed him. The run defense is we see the difference when either he or Dex are not on the field. It's brutal. So and that interior push, that interior pass rush, it's so important against quarterbacks. So um I think he's going to rest. I think there might be other players in this situation. So I agree with you. I think they'll play starters selectively and limited. I think there's starters like Xavier McKinney that need some
Yes.
time on the field.
Yes.
Um, I think a guy like a Bredesen, that offensive line could use continue continue play to get that cohesiveness together.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think there's something to staying in game shape and keeping momentum, right? Uh, but I I I think this is a game where Davis Webb is going to dress. They're going to have three quarterbacks. Maybe Daniel plays a quarter and then get him the hell off the field and get Tyrod out there and have Davis Webb ready. Uh, Play our backup offensive lineman um, and let them get some regular season experience, which is phenomenal and invaluable because when do these guys get regular season experience? So I think that there's a benefit to that as well. Um, and listen, you got to wonder if Philadelphia's going to play Jalen Hurts. He's been hurt for the past couple of games. He's got his injury issue. They're going to the playoffs. If they lose, they could drop all the way down to the fifth seed, as crazy as
Yes.
that sounds,
Yes.
depending upon how some of the rest of the this weekend schedule plays out. So there's a lot on the line for them because you go from having a bye and then home field advantage throughout to not having a bye if they lose and potentially not even having home field advantage if they lose. So they have a lot riding on the line, but also do they want to play Jalen Hurts? And what if he re-injures himself? So it's going to be fascinating, not just what the Giants do, but in some ways, I think it's going to be fascinating to see what the Eagles do.
Maybe they start Hurts, and if they've got a nice, comfortable lead at halftime, maybe they rest in the second half. Yeah, nice problem to have. Can you imagine, Steve, if they fell to the third seed and we play them in the playoffs, round one?
Let me say one other thing, not to change the subject back, but let me answer a question with a different question. And I know we'll get to the job that Shane and Daboll have done this season, but one of the reasons I think he's coach of the year also, aside from the obvious of what he's done with this team, we only have two Pro Bowlers. I mean, come on, we can go on and on.
Hmm.
Is there's really only been one major issue I've had with him the whole season, and I think you know exactly what it is. It's when most Giants fans agree. What the hell was he thinking playing Adoree Jackson? Um,
Hmm.
and I wonder if that's he seems to be such a smart guy. He's been doing this for so long. He's so well prepared for this role. You also wonder, listen, we all make mistakes, but what's the definition? It's don't make the same mistake again. You got to wonder if he's in any way impacted by his own decision to play Adoree and then as a punt returner, and then with his own eyes see Adoree get hurt because of the decision he made. You got to wonder if he's going to think about those things and say, man, I don't want to do that again. I don't want to play guys that there's something bigger out there we're playing for.
Right. So you bring up Adoree Jackson. Would you play Adoree Jackson this week?
I would if the trainers say he's right. I thought he was going to play this past weekend. In fact, I think a lot of Giants fans thought. I know Art Stapleton had some doubts. I listened to his podcast leading up the day before the game. But the consensus outside of Art, the consensus by most of the beat reporters seemed to be that he was leaning towards it was Xavier that we didn't think was going to play.
Right. Right.
McKinney and Adoree was, and it ended up being just the opposite. So, look, I don't want him to play at all if there's any risk of him getting re-injured because there's still weakness there.
Yes.
But if he's 100%, I think it would be nice to see him play for a quarter to get his conditioning back because you can't. Today's NFL is not like 1986. You can't replicate game conditions in practice. So
If they were getting thrown on by Indianapolis, I think you would have seen him come on the field. I think he was. Yeah, I have a funny feeling with him that he would have. It was a wait and see approach with him. Okay, he's active. Maybe we don't need him because again,
was he active? He was active. I thought he wasn't even active for the game.
Was that correct? I thought he was active. Maybe he. Oh, you know what, Steve? You're right. He was inactive. You're absolutely right. So okay. So then I'm wrong. I admit it, folks. I can make a mistake. So
look, it'll be interesting if he dresses everybody and plays. I can't imagine he plays Leo. I can't imagine, but it'll be fascinating if he plays all the starters for like 2 or 3 quarters. I don't know that we'll agree with it, but
yeah,
it'll be fun. It'll be fun to watch if it's a competitive game.
yeah. No, I agree with you. I agree with you. All right, let's switch gears.
Well, let me just say this: we will learn a lot about Daboll. There's been some seminal moments throughout the season where we've learned some things as fans about our coach and who he really is. And I think we're going to learn a lot about this guy this weekend.
Yeah, but you know what? Look. Okay, he's been to the playoffs with Buffalo. Okay. So
With a lot of teams.
yeah, so he's got the feel of the playoffs.
He's won Super Bowls in New England and
Correct. But doing it as an assistant and doing it as the head coach are still night and day.
That's right.
All right. So if he makes mistakes, fine. We're not going to be happy because we want to win. Now we're to the point as Giant fans. All right, now we're playing the games. We want to win. There's no moral victory from here on out. Okay, we made the playoffs. We want to win the games. Okay. Even short of getting blown out, even if they're competitive and they lose, I can live with that. Okay. I want to win. Don't get me wrong, I'm not going to be happy, especially if it's a game they had control of and they lost late. But I don't want to hear anybody killing Brian Daboll. He stinks, terrible head. I want to hear it. I'm not gonna engage that. I'm not. All right. 2 things left here. We got some time. Where do you want to go? Do you want to go? Do we bring back Saquon and Daniel Jones, or do you want to go Daboll and Shane? Which way do you want to go?
Let's talk about Saquon and DJ and Ian Rappaport's report.
Okay, go ahead. Why don't you start that one off?
So several days ago, I think a large percentage of people watching or listening right now may know already. Ian Rappaport, the very well known NFL reporter, he reported that Giant ownership wants to do whatever they can to try to resign Saquon and Daniel Jones in the offseason. I thought that was great. I thought it's common sense. I didn't jump to any conclusions though that they're just going to give them whatever they want. I think that with a guy like Joe Shane in charge, it gives us all comfort that there ain't no way in hell that they're going to do it though, at the risk of uh, bastardizing or distorting the salary cap, which I think is a good segue. Eventually, we're going to talk about Daboll and Shane.
Yeah.
So I know this is sacrilegious for many people listening and watching. I am still very concerned about committing major money to Saquon. It has nothing to do with him as a person. It has nothing to do with him being our leader, which I think he is, even more than DJ. I think he is the voice of the locker room right now. It has nothing to do with the fact that he is still amongst all running backs, even Nick Chubb, who still probably the best pure running back in the league right now. It hurts me to say. Saquon is still all worldly when you compare him against all other running backs in today's league, as far as I'm concerned.
Mhm.
He's 26 going on 27, I believe. I don't want us to do the same thing and make the same mistake that Dallas made with Ezekiel Elliott.
25,
There
Steve.
aren't any. What's that?
25.
25, but he'll
Yeah.
be 26.
Yes.
With already several injuries in his history. So yes, less tread on the tire, but you know, man, and I'm not worried about Joe Shane. I think Joe Shane will stay disciplined with that. And Daniel Jones, look, I think they should slot him in as like the 12th or 13th best quarterback down to the 15th best quarterback, like somewhere in there. He's not top 10. Obviously, he's a work in progress, but I think he's the bridge. He's the guy that and you've heard me say this before. I heard a former general manager, Scott Pioli, mention this in the offseason, that we're going to start seeing this trend of what Kansas City did when they had Alex Smith. He took them to the playoffs, and they didn't waste a first round pick on guys unless they really really fell in love, and then they traded up and got Patrick Mahomes. I think the Giants, big picture, I think the Canes of the world have learned that's what you do. You don't draft a quarterback that you think is one of the better quarterbacks of the draft and you could probably mold him. You wait until you find a guy you truly fall in love with. But then what do we do in the meantime? He's earned the right for a second contract. Give him a 3 or 4 year. I'd rather it be three with a third year is voidable, but we all know he's probably going to demand at least a 4 year contract. So maybe 3 years with a fourth year voidable. Give him 19 to 23 million a year, somewhere in that range. Um, and the nice thing about a 4 year contract is you can spread out a big chunk of that as a bonus.
Yes.
So I'm sure they're going to get creative. I'm sure they're going to probably do what they have to do. And I think Daniel wants to come back. He doesn't want change. He doesn't want to go somewhere else. He doesn't want to have to start over with another. This kid, they gave him an opportunity. They said, listen, you've been screwed over, but you need to prove it. You need to improve. And he's done everything they've asked. And I think they're going to do the right thing for him. And I think it's a win-win for both sides. So I see them hopefully easily re-signing Daniel Jones. I'm actually not so sure about Saquon. Um, I know Saquon wants to be here. We've all heard it in his interviews. Um, but I'm just worried about them giving too much money to Saquon. He's a running back, and we all know that you can find running backs. And there have been very, very, very few Super Bowl winning teams with the number one, number two, number three running back in the league on that team. And there's a reason for that. You don't need it. And B, when you devote that much money to the running back, this isn't 1979 or 1976. It's not how you build an offense anymore. So
So would you be more, if you're Joe Shane, would you be more inclined to try to sign Daniel Jones to that 3-4 year contract and tag Saquon?
yeah.
Okay.
And if they tag him, they're going to tag him with the idea that um, what happens is if you tag a guy, it stretches out the calendar to give you more
Yes.
time to try to re-sign him.
Correct. Correct. Um, and again, it gives them more options to fill more holes during the off season.
Yeah.
And then you can even, negotiate with Saquon once the season starts. After you see what your cap is and you see all. So there is flexibility in doing that, and I don't disagree with you there. Now, just let's just play a little game here. Where do you think right now, what do you think Daniel Jones is ranked? 1 to 32. Where do you think he is?
Me personally,
Well, if you had to guess, where do you think he's ranked right now?
by what metric?
I've got the quarterback rankings up on my screen.
So by what metric?
It looks like. Oh, okay. I don't know what the exact metrics, but according to this, he's 15th. It looks like they're combining, Steve. It looks like the combination of yards, um, completion percentage, so on and so forth. But he's 15th, and you did say middle of the pack, so you called it perfectly.
I'll answer it this way because there's a little nugget I want to drop on you. Um, but I don't want to do it because I want to hear your thoughts on re-signing Saquon and DJ. I
Mhm.
think if you give him a true number one wide receiver, that's an extra 100 yards a game on average. Because not only is that receiver going to get, let's say, 80, 90 yards a game on average, but it opens the passing game up for other players. Let's just give him an extra 100 yards. So if Daniel right now is averaging 200 yards a game, now he's going to get 300 yards. Not because we need him throwing the ball 40 times, but now it just opens getting that Odell Beckham type, as we all know, like getting that true number one wide receiver. It's like what Steph, as everybody likes to say, look at the change in Josh Allen once they got Stephon Diggs. So I think that that's also why it's so important to stay disciplined and only give so much money to your running back and to your quarterback because it will allow them the salary cap space to still go out and maybe trade
Yeah.
for a true number one wide receiver. So anyway, um, I think if they were to do that, he all of a sudden becomes eighth, ninth, 10th, 11th best quarterback. Is he one of the top five? No. Will he ever be a top five? Probably not. But we talked about it when we had that big group on a number of weeks ago.
Yes.
If we look back to the last 25 or 30 years worth of Super Bowls, the number one, two, three, or four quarterback in the NFL didn't always win.
Right.
And quite frankly, the winner of the Super Bowl was not always a number one draft pick.
Right.
So there's a lot of ways to win a Super Bowl, and there's a lot of ways to get there.
Contractually, he's the 19th highest paid right
Yeah.
now in the NFL. So there is room there where you can negotiate him to, I don't want to say a team friendly deal, but a manageable deal, manageable as per the salary cap. And let me just, I know I'm throwing this out at you, but to answer the question, I'm in agreement with you. I think you sign Daniel Jones to the contract and you tag Saquon. But now let's just keep one thing in mind here, which not a lot of people talk about. There's actually two tags, Steve. There's a franchise tag and there's that transition tag that can also be used. And again, I'm not trying to muddy the waters, but there are some creative ways here that they can get them both back next
Yeah.
year. Okay. Salary wise, right now, Saquon is the ninth highest paid running back in the league. So again, there is some room there. Now, but what I'm looking at here, Steve, is of all the players ahead of Saquon right now, all right, salary wise, none of them are free agents. None of them are unrestricted free agents this year. So they're all signed to long-term deals. So I don't expect Saquon to set the market. But he's going to be asking money. When you see some of these players that are ahead of him, okay. Do you think he deserves more than Alvin Kamara right now? I do,
Yeah.
right? Um, let's see who else is ahead of him here that I could pick up. Aaron Jones.
Christian McCaffrey is probably way ahead of him
Well,
in terms of
McCaffrey's
salary.
ahead of him, but do you pay him higher than McCaffrey? I don't know. I mean, you could make a
No,
case they're 1 and 1A, but I no, I wouldn't. I would
I'd
say,
let him walk if he wants that much.
yeah, I would try to, I think he deserves more than Kamara. Zeke is ahead of him, but I think we get better output from Saquon than the Cowboys do Zeke, to be honest with you. Maybe I'm
Oh
saying
yeah, Zeke's not
I
even
just don't like Zeke, but I think
he's not even their number one running back anymore.
right. Dallas also has Tony Pollard, who is a great running back. So it's a little bit of a different situation there. And maybe I'm saying it because I just can't stand Zeke. It drives me crazy, as a matter of fact. But okay. Dalvin Cook, that's a tough one. Dalvin Cook is a good running back.
Yeah, I actually love him.
Yeah. Derrick Henry, I'm not even gonna go there. Nick Chubb is ahead of him. Again, hard to make that case. Aaron Jones, I would pay him more than Aaron Jones. And Joe Mixon. Right? Mixon had a good year last year, and I think he's had a pretty good year this year. But
Yeah, but he's not Saquon. He's not Saquon.
and thank you. And prior to that, he had the same kind of track record as Saquon, injuries. So
Yeah.
Saquon is going to ask a lot of money. That's why I think you tag him and you kind of just fill out the holes, and then you see what you can do from there. But it's a very interesting question. It's a very
Listen, let me throw a nugget, a wrench for everybody watching, listening. Carl did not have the opportunity to prepare for this. Um, Maybe it's upsetting people that we're even having this conversation because it's like, listen, it's the playoffs. Let's not talk about the draft. Let's not talk about free agency. We're, if we're so excited the playoffs, let's just talk about this. And I agree with that. But because we're making the playoffs way ahead of schedule, and because I start thinking about, man, there's a lot of teams that disappointed, and there's going to be some players available. What do you think about if we bring DJ and Barkley back and Joe Shane trades for a wide receiver? And I'll even tell you who.
give me the
I
team.
don't want them. I don't want them to trade for DeAndre Hopkins, although I think he'll be available. He's a Hall of Fame wide receiver, but he's going to be he's 30 years old. We don't. If we trade for somebody, I don't think Shane's going to trade for somebody. Still incredibly productive, but no. But Devonte Adams wants out because Carr is going to be gone. That's his boy. Now he's a big nut. So there's some salary issues
Yeah.
there. But then Denzel Mims, the Jets may make him available. Now, a team like Chicago desperately needs wide receivers. There'll be competition for guys like that if they're available. But what do you think if we bring these guys back? We've made the playoffs. Hopefully things go great, at least in the first round. We'll see how things play out. But now, as the season is winding down and we see there's some very good wide receivers, some younger than others, some with different track records, but guys with major production and or major potential who might be available for a trade.
So, all right. So Joe Shane has proven that if there's a deal to be made, he's going to make it.
And let me just say this. I still think we should draft a wide receiver.
Yes.
But can you imagine if we draft a young wide receiver, if not in the first round, even in the second or third, a lot of teams' number one wide receivers were, remember, I did that study as well.
Yeah.
50% of all number one wide receivers were actually drafted in the second or third round, not in this. So you don't have to draft one in the first. But what if and on top of that, they trade for a wide receiver?
All right. So interesting question. Good question. To be honest with you, I don't see them trading for one and then drafting one first round. I'll say that. You trade for one, you're going to fill another hole. Obviously. And then the question is, well, who do you trade for? Now, if you bring in a Devontae Adams, okay, now, yeah, that's going to bastardize our salary cap. So there's a big nut attached to Devontae Adams, and I don't know if they like a receiver in this draft. I don't see them trading and bringing on that salary, because then, so then think about it. What are you saying to Saquon if you trade for Devontae Adams and you tag Saquon?
That's true.
All right, so
That's fair.
there's that. But you're starting to see, especially in all these bowl games, you're starting to see some receivers emerging. The Jets hit a home run with Garrett Wilson. All right. So, and I'm just using him as an example.
Justin Jefferson wasn't a top 5 or top 10 pick. He fell in that.
Exactly right. You're exactly right. So
Odell Beckham, we got him at what, number 14 that year?
Correct. So, and not for nothing, Steve, he's going to be on the market too in the offseason. Anyway,
Yeah.
I know. You want to have the
I mean, he
conversation.
he he did, not to muddy it on top of it, because I feel like I haven't even given you a chance to fully express yourself with your response, but you got to wonder, what if he ends up coming to the Giants?
So, I
It's
don't
great.
know. I don't know if I can really answer that question now because there's
I know, I
a lot
know.
of chips out there. I mean, it's fascinating, and
You
it's
never know.
right. It's a great conversation, but I'm not going to alienate Saquon, who's been a good soldier here, at the risk of, and as much as we need a good number one, um, how old is Devontae Adams? 27,
I
28.
Yeah, he's at 28 or 29,
Okay,
I
so
believe.
all right, with a big number, okay, there's no questioning his production at all. I would love it. If they made that trade, I'll bitch and moan about the salary, but man, I'd go out and buy the jersey.
I
Um,
don't think it's going to happen because the Raiders are going to want at least one number one pick, if not multiple.
right.
But I pose all this to you not because I want them to trade for DeAndre or Devontae, but what about a Denzel Mims type? You know,
Well, so I was going to get to Denzel Mims. Is Denzel Mims contract up?
he's
Does he
still on
get
his rookie contract.
but he's year what? 4? Next year
I
will be
think he's
4?
so 2023 will be his last year,
Okay.
but you could do trade and sign, right? They could trade for him and then extend him, or
Do the Jets release him?
oh,
Uh,
they could trade him to any number of teams.
And if the word is out there that, hey, if we can't, if they don't trade him, they're going to release him.
I think that's why the Jets held on to him this year, because they had some disgruntled wide receivers, but they had such a talented wide receiver core. I think there'll be a bidding war for him. Like, right off the top of my head, I mentioned the Chicago Bears. They're desperate in need of
All right, but
anybody.
let me come at you then a different way in Denzel Mims. Okay, is Denzel Mims a number one?
Well, so that's the thing. They could draft a number one wide receiver. It- Look what we're doing with, as I said about Richie James and Isaiah Hodgins. We now have two very good number three receivers. You could argue one of them might be a number two on certain
Yeah.
teams. So it's you don't have a number one. You don't even really have a good number two. Maybe Slayton is a number two on some teams or number three on others. Um, just add talent to the wide receiver room. We still need a number one wide receiver, but maybe they could draft one on a rookie contract and then put Mims in that wide receiver room. They're going to get opportunities and they're going to improve the talent of the room overall.
Steve, I got to tell you something. I watched the TCU Michigan game
Oh,
Saturday,
oh,
and
that kid, Quentin,
that
right?
that TCU receiver, and I forget his name right now,
Quentin.
6'4", and he runs like a 4.2 or 4.3 40.
There's
Oh
going to
my
be
God, there's your number one.
there's going to be a crop of those wide receivers. I mean, he's perhaps the best, but this is going to be another very strong wide receiver
Wow.
class.
So again, fascinating to discuss.
Sorry, we went on.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It was fun. I don't have the answer, but let's close it with this: the job that Daboll and Schoen have done.
Yes,
Okay, I'm gonna start because I've got some pretty strong feelings about it. We said coming into the season that they won the offseason by hiring Shane and Daboll. There's a lot of bitching and moaning out there about, well, the offensive line is still an issue. The wide receivers still are not good. Okay, granted. He was very limited in what he can do in one offseason, number one. However, our offensive line is improved slightly, maybe than last year. Okay, but I still think they're improved. I think the run blocking has been better.
Oh
Okay.
yeah.
The protection, marginal, but I think improved. But you know what? Here's where I'm going to go with this. I'm going to go in a couple different directions here. Number one, I'm going to go right at that wide receiver room. We can all bitch and moan that we don't have a number one. We got rid of the headache in Kadarius Toney. Not our problem anymore. He was back Sunday. Okay, good for him. Okay, fumbled a punt, by the way, but okay, good for him. And that whole drama. We were getting nothing at him, so we turned that into 2 draft picks. That's a win. Regardless of what he does in Kansas City. What he was doing here was 0. We got 2 draft picks for him. Okay. But our wide receivers, yes, they are below average, but they're serviceable. In addition to Schoen getting bodies that are serviceable, Daboll has constructed an offense that suits their needs. So we may not be scoring 40 points a game, but we have been in the majority of our games this year. You know what? We added a tight end. And I got news for you. Not only do we have a starting tight end for the future, but you've got a little depth at the tight end position now. And they can still improve that. But the point is that was a nothing position last year too. Right? Evan Ingram. Now Evan Ingram's been great, by the way, for Jacksonville. He's had a good year for them. Good for him.
Yes, he has.
I don't want to hear they're bringing him back. I don't want that's not going to happen. Okay. But the fact of the matter is, you know what? Okay, our linebacking corpse is terrible. Okay. They're going to address the offensive line. We know this. They're going to address the linebacker position. It turns out that, you know what? They didn't do too bad improving the secondary. Okay, bodies, they need bodies, of course. And they could still improve it. But you know what? Flott has made me eat a little bit of crow. All right, he's come on a little bit. And again, look at some of the pieces they added in the offseason by just, Fabian Moreau. He's not great. He's had his ups and downs. But, first half of the season, I think he was our MVP by far. All right. So I think they've done a phenomenal job with what they had available to work with. And the limited amount of resources and time they had to fix it. It's only year 1, and they got us to the playoffs. This was a 4-win team last year. And now here we are getting ready to play our first playoff game since 2016. I don't have to say another word. That's your cue, Steve.
So I'll take Daboll first. Look, he's coach of the year. I said it in the beginning, his actions match his words. That first game in Tennessee, he had told these guys, I'm going to trust the offense. And what did he do? He went for it. We all know how it played out. 2-point conversion, et cetera. They won the game. I heard him yesterday in his interviews. Somebody asked him, it was a reporter that doesn't tend to ask many questions, so I forget his name. How do you decide, how did you develop relationships? Or it was something along those lines. And he said, it's not one way. It's each guy took a different amount of time to develop trust. The question was, how does he develop trust with players? Oh, I remember. The guy said, well, was it in the OTAs and the preseason? When did it happen? He goes, well, it's different for every guy. He gave examples. He's like, I played ping pong with Saquon and with my opposite hand and beat him. And he's competitive. And he's like, he goes, DJ, I had Daniel at my house. And we have playbook spread on the table. And I'm sitting there with a cigar. He goes, every guy was different. And you just get the feeling that Joe Judge, who still as a person, just may be a great dude. I mean, for all I know, love to have a beer with the guy. Pat Shermer seemed like a nice guy.
Yeah.
Ben McAdoo, I don't know. But Joe Judge had his guys, Logan Ryan and this one. But you didn't get the feeling that he had all the Abel seems to be a relationship person. He's talked about that. He's created a place where he's going out of his way to develop relationships with these players and trust. And if there's a player that's a distraction, as you said, get rid of him. If there's a player like Galladay who's a distraction because he doesn't contribute, sit him down. Listen, that's not easy. And I think it's easier because he has Shane behind him, supporting him, and the ownership saying, you do what you need to do. $72 million, a lot of coaches would say, oh, I'll keep playing him.
Mm.
He's willing to make the tough decisions, is what I'm trying to say. Do I agree? Do we agree with every single thing he's done? Most, actually. Um, I love that he gave up play calling. That shows humbleness. It shows that he realizes that he needs to manage the game itself and he can't micromanage and still manage like a lot of head coaches are afraid to give up the offense. But my only huge issue with him the entire season was playing Adoree as a punt returner, and we saw how that played out. And
Mm.
hopefully he's learned from that, and that's okay. I make mistakes. You make mistakes. We all make mistakes. That's what it is to be human.
Mm.
Hopefully he's learned from it. Um, Shane, so Daboll, coach of the year, and not just for what he personally has done, but the staff that he's put together, bringing in Wink that
Yes.
he actually didn't have a prior relationship with,
Yes.
just how humble he's been, and he's not allowed. It's not about his ego. It's always about the players and the rest of his staff. And the final thought with Daboll is he's brought in guys who truly understand how to teach because and we've heard Wink talk about this. Wink has his own mini staff that he's brought in of people
Yeah.
he trusts, and Daboll let him bring them in, and that's allowed them to look at a Dexter Lawrence, who's already a very good defensive tackle, and say, "You're good, but we're going to teach you to use your hands and
Mm.
extend your arms and do some other things, so you become a Pro Bowler." And guess what he is? Hopefully, not just this year, but for the foreseeable future and the extent. So, Daboll, phenomenal. Shane, I only thought he made one mistake the entire time that he's been there, and that was telegraphing that they needed to trade Bradbury. Um, I think most fans didn't want Bradbury traded.
Mm.
Uh, he's playing at not just a Pro Bowl, but all pro level there in Philadelphia. This is tough to watch. Um, I think it was Gettleman's fault for signing them to the way they backloaded that contract. They didn't have much of a choice, but other than that, Shane has been unbelievable. I love in retrospect, the discipline that he showed by not trading away any assets at the deadline. He's continued to find players like Isaiah Hodgins, like Fabian Moreau, like you said, and so many others that we could talk about. Um, and I love that he seems to understand you build a team, the most successful teams. Now I realize the Rams won the Super Bowl by just trading away all their draft picks and it made me sick to watch because A, it worked. B, I don't like the Rams going back to 1989, and
Flipper Anderson.
I was at that game. But it also pissed me off because I said to myself, it's not sustainable. And it reminds me of the Marlins in baseball.
Right.
Build it up and then tear it down. It's
Right.
like, you know what? What fan would want to see that? I mean,
Right.
that's not how you build it. The most successful franchises are the ones New England, Pittsburgh, um, Kansas City now. They understand the value of draft picks and that if you draft the right players, the majority of your picks work out. Maybe not all, but the majority. You have a, a roster that's loaded with rookie contracts. You don't have to try to build a team through free agency and then distort the salary cap. So he seems to have an eye to the future with understanding that A, that's how you do it. And B, he himself and his scouts that he's already changed the front office seem to be so good at identifying talent. He did it in Miami in pro player scouting. He did it in Buffalo as the assistant GM. And he's already done it here with this draft. Now, unfortunately, some of these kids that we were so excited about, like Beavers, as you've said, and
Yeah.
some of these other guys got hurt. And that's going to happen. But they already have 9, but potentially 11 draft picks next year because of compensation. So I'm so excited looking forward to the future, knowing this guy and the staff he's put together and their quality of their scouting. We're going to have another draft again with 11 draft picks, unless he trades some.
Mm.
So I'm unbelievable job by Daboll. I think he's coach of the year. And um, to me, Shane is easily the best general manager already that we've had since George Young. Um, it's early days. It's still the honeymoon phase. It's only not even one full season, but so much to be excited about with both these guys.
I agree. And you know what? You know what else I like about Joe Shane? Scouts every weekend.
Yep.
Goes to
And
games
he
every
and he hired and he hired the guy from Philadelphia who's
Philadelphia.
now our assistant GM. So another example of getting rid of your ego.
Yeah,
You don't need to be like what we did what they did at the New York Giants, where they just promoted internally.
right.
Don't want to bring a guy from the outside. Well, maybe bringing in fresh ideas is not a bad thing, especially from a place where like Howie Roseman, the best general manager in football right now. Like maybe they know what they're doing. Bring this guy in here. And by the way, he basically built that offensive line in Philadelphia. So let's bring this kid in. He
Yeah,
wants to be GM one day, and we'll benefit from his skill. So that takes somebody who's man enough, and it's not about ego. And I mean, both these guys seem to have that, Carl.
yeah.
They both seem to have that. It's not about me. It's not about my ego. You know,
Hey, whatever they're doing is working. Let's hope it continues. And you know what? You mentioned something else, like how Daboll, had Daniel Jones at his house. He played ping pong with Saquon. I love how these players look for him after each win
yeah,
and celebrate it with him. You could look, I coach Steve, and I know that there's a level there between coaches and players. Okay. But what I like, even though there is that level, it just feels like on this team, he's one of the guys. Reminds me like Mike Tomlin with his players. One of the guys. I actually think the coach down in Miami is one of the guys. So, I like that. And I think that just fosters a good atmosphere. And that's going to get out, and players are going to want to play for this guy. So I'm excited. I'm in agreement with you. I'm excited. I think the future is the arrow is clearly pointing up, and but I'll worry about the future later. Let's get past Philadelphia healthy, and let's win.
playoffs.
Yep, exactly. All right, brother. Look, this was great. Good to be back at it with you, man. Glad you're back home safe, and I enjoy this with you, man. I'm so glad we did it again. We're back in it again.
Look, let me end with this thought. What Fly Guy's been referring to everybody is my family. We finally took a family vacation for the first time in about 3 years. I'm sure many of you relate with the pandemic. Um, Carl started off this show talking about last night's game and the prayers for Hamlin, who we hope pulls through. I just am finishing with some thoughts about family and what's really, I think what the point I'm making is what's really important in life. So we appreciate all of you. We're all fans of the Giants. That's why we're all watching and listening. But we also realize what's important. And I think that speak for you and I both that we don't take any of you for granted. We appreciate you participating in this little community that we're trying to build, not just amongst fans, but also our fellow podcasters. So uh, I love that I'm back, and I love that I came back to Giants football and playoffs. It's been awesome.
Good to have you back, brother. We'll be in touch, and I can't wait to do this again with you next week.
See you
Steve,
next week.
enjoy the game. Everybody, we'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much. And again, thank you for your support. We'll talk soon. Steve, have a good night, buddy.
You too.